Hey guys, welcome back to the House of Gouldians. My apologies for the long break once again. I know that there was a previous break where I had flu. This time it was nothing related to ill health. It was just my laptop that I do all my editing from packed up, and we were trying to recover the information off the hard drive and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, we didn't have much luck with that, and the laptop that I'm now using doesn't quite have the power that my old one did in terms of the editing and that, so I will obviously need to look at trying to replace that at some point. However, the show must go on. So I decided today to discuss the topic of melanism with you. But I'm doing this as a single take, so there's no editing in between. I'm starting the conversation as I have done, and I'm going through until we finish the topic. So forgive if I sort of repeat myself, or if I make the odd mistake and have to correct myself and that kind of thing. I don't have the privilege of editing that out at the moment. Anyway, so coming back to the topic at hand, melanism. Lately on social media, I've seen a lot of pictures of Gouldians that are obviously there's something going on in terms of the darkening of the pigment, which is what we refer to as a melanistic bird. Now, worldwide, there's about 300 recognized melanistic species, or species that have a melanistic mutation, if you like. So it's not that that darkening of the bird is not well known in the birding game with different species. However, when we look at the Gouldian, it's a little bit different, and I'll explain why I say that. So the examples of your sort of ground dwelling birds, like your fowl and pheasants and all that kind of thing, and some doves and a bunch of others that have a known melanistic mutation, is that it affects all the plumage basically of the bird. Where if it's a brown bird, and normally it's like a sort of a medium brown, it's now a darker brown, and that applies in general to the bird. So we'll get into my sort of theories on why that type of melanism exists and what the scientists have figured out with that kind of thing versus what we're seeing on the Gouldian side of things on social media. So the Gouldian one that we're seeing is where the bird typically has black coming around from the back of the nape round to the chest or breast area of the bird, and it tends to be patchy. Some are extreme examples, so the bird's got a lot of black in it, and others it's sort of more mild. And if you had to look at all these photos and say, there's multiple birds with this, therefore it must be a new mutation, it's not just an aberration or error, I could understand why you would think that. But there's one catch, and that is, we know that if we take that bird and you put it in a well-lit aviary where it's getting natural light and it's not in a bird room, generally speaking, that melanism disappears when they molt out. In other words, they return to a normal looking bird after the molt. So the melanistic birds that we're seeing on social media, if you query the breeder, almost all guarantee you that it would have come from a bird room where they're getting limited access to natural sunshine, or it's come from a completely enclosed covered aviary where there's not a lot of natural light as well. So the fact that it goes away when you put it in natural light tells you it's not a true mutation. However, you do get what they're now terming a dark factor Gouldian. So we'll get into that shortly, and you'll see where I'm heading with this later on. So what else besides lack of sunshine could be causing melanism? Because the counter argument to what I've been saying is that, why is it one bird and not my whole bird room? If sunshine's the problem, why is it one individual that's gone dark, whereas the others are still perfectly normal? And there's a couple of answers to that question, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. Otherwise, this would have been a very short episode. So the other thing that we know can cause darkening of feathers, and I've personally experienced this, so I'm talking from a position of experience with this, is diet. Now, hemp seed is one of the ones that, if given in excess, has been known to cause an excessive amount of oils and that type of thing in the feathers, because it is an oily seed and has resulted in dark feathering. The example that I'm referring to in particular is I had a baby cockatiel given to my daughter. I had run out of my normal hand rearing mix that I use if I'm raising a cockatiel, and as a result I used one for my macaw parrots. Now, macaws have a lot richer diet in terms of peanuts and oil-based foods, and as a result the mix for hand rearing macaws is quite different to that which is used on other parakeets like cockatiels. And the net effect of this is that as this chick that hadn't got its feathers when I got it, it was all sort of bald if you like, it only had a few pin feathers. When those feathers first came out, they were so dark I actually thought I had a black cockatiel, and I'm thinking that is weird. I didn't see anything like that in the owner's aviary when I got the bird from him. And at first I didn't realize what was going on, and then when it now got onto normal seed and it was eating the normal seed given to the cockatiels and that kind of thing, and a full diet, because now it's not on formula anymore, the bird then molted out normally. The feathers turned to the normal grey, and there's nothing unusual about this particular bird at all. So the point that I'm making is we know diet can affect a bird. Now, you might say once again, but if I give the same food to all my birds, and therefore it wouldn't just be the one individual. Okay, so one thing that we must remember is, and I've seen it in my bird room often, is I've got a pair that will practically empty their food bowl every day. And the reason being is that it's only 2 birds. There's no ways. This is enough for a week under normal circumstances. Well, 5 days. But they empty the whole bowl in a day because they're looking for certain seeds. They have a taste preference that the other birds in the room, for whatever reason, they don't do the same thing. They're not particularly perturbed. There's actually 2 or 3 pairs like that, but they focus on different seeds. So one of them particularly likes your white millet, another one particularly likes your canary seed. Now, coming back to the diet scenario, if one bird is eating excessive amounts of fatty seed, Niagara for example, which is quite common amongst Gouldian breeders to be feeding the birds, they're going to have that higher oil content, and therefore they are likely to have the effect of the darkening of the feathers. Okay, so now we've got 2 possible causes. We know for a fact that sunlight plays a role, and secondly that diet can play a role. It's been proven scientifically, and I've personally experienced it myself in that particular cockatiel. But there's a bigger picture, and this is where I think a lot of guys get confused, and that is that you still have scenarios where things affect in the environment affect different animals or members of a species differently. And how does that happen? Well, you can think for yourself in human beings. We may not have, put it this way, you get visual inherited genes, and that's things like blue eyes or brown eyes or green eyes, whatever the case might be. You get visually inherited things like hair color, and normally if you look at one or both parents, you'll see where the child has inherited that from. And the same goes for our birds. So if, for example, you have a red-headed pair and you're breeding them to each, well, the cock and the hen are both red-headed, the chicks are going to be red-headed. We know that. It's an established mutation. We know how it's inherited. We know the detail around that. Same goes for your back colors. Most of them, I'm not talking the latest ones or the newest ones, but most of the back colors we know it's a recessive gene, or it's a sex-linked gene, or whatever the case might be. So we know that there's visual things that can be inherited that are abnormal, if you like, hence we call them a mutation, right? But we know exactly how the genes work with that because it's visual, and we've been able to test for it, we've been able to replicate it, and therefore it is established. And that's the key difference. With an error or aberration, it's not the case. So it's a random way the genes combined to result in a defect that makes the bird more susceptible to something environmental, in this case sunshine or diet or whatever the case might be. You then have genes that are, and this is where I was also going with this, is that you have genes that we don't realize are being passed on because it's not something visual. So in other words, I could pass on to my child, or in my bird's case, they could pass it on to their chick, an inability to process certain vitamins or process certain amino acids or minerals or whatever it is. And as a result, that one chick, now the way his or her genes combined, now gives you that error that's resulted in more melanistic patches, or being more susceptible to those dark patches. Okay, so if you see a Gouldian finch that has these patchy black areas to it, that is what's going on. It's a combination of something that was inherited genetically that has made the bird have a predisposition to lack of sunshine. In other words, lack of sunshine is going to bring out the melanism, or make it turn more melanistic. The error in the gene combination has made it more maybe susceptible to fat in the diet, that then brings out that darker coloration. Okay, but the point is, it's an underlying gene combination error that has caused it. If you had to then try and replicate that, the parents might never ever produce another one that looks like that, because it was just a freak thing. And you can think about it in human beings as well. I know a friend of ours has a child that unfortunately was born with a cleft palate and a club foot and hearing problems and all the rest of it. And the doctors, were a bit concerned when they found out that his wife was pregnant the second time. But the second time, the child had absolutely nothing wrong with it, the second child. So the point is, sometimes the genes combined a little bit incorrectly, or whatever the case might be, and it leads to a whole bunch of genetic abnormalities that then can cause stuff like this to come out. So you need to bear that in mind. Now, having said all of that, and basically dispelled Melanistic Gouldians, we do have, as I alluded to earlier, something called a dark factor bird. Now, in true melanistic mutations of groundfowl and that type of thing, how that's come about is that a bird, for whatever reason, has ended up having a slightly darker version of the normal, so a darker brown to the normal bird. And because of the sort of vegetation that that particular bird finds itself in, it proves to be more successful from a survival of the fittest perspective, and as a result goes on to reproduce that slightly darker pigmentation in its offspring. Okay. And as a result, you get regional differences between wild species, or the same species, but wild sort of mutations, if you like. So I know it's common in corn snakes, for example, on the reptile side, where in certain regions they tend to be darker or have more darker aspects to them. And the same goes for the birds as well. So, if they're living in a more sort of shaded area, or an area where there is sort of darker foliage, it makes sense that having slightly darker camouflage is going to help the bird more than having slightly lighter camouflage. And we've seen this in that it's not only melanism that benefits from, or the birds could benefit in this way. We've seen the opposite, where lighter color birds that are leaning more towards your sort of paler colors, they are more successful in areas that are brighter and the foliage is more greys and sort of leaning towards your more sort of lighter colors, and they would be then more successful. Even though it's the same species, regionally you're getting differences because of environments and which ones have proved more successful over time. So how does that relate back to the Gouldian? Well, there are examples doing the rounds out there where the blue in the back of the neck is darker than it would normally be. The same bird has darkening on the legs compared to a normal version of the bird. And the green is more rich and darker as well. So it's not black patches, but it's darker pigmentation of the already colored area. So it's not changing the green to black. It's not changing the blue to black. It's just making it a darker version of its normal state. Now, those examples are consistent, and those seem to be, but please, a lot of breeders are needing to prove it out and do a lot more research around it. So please, I'm not saying it's one or the other at this stage, but there is anecdotal evidence at this stage to say that that is a true sort of dark version of the bird, or dark factor bird. It's not a recognized mutation yet, so you won't see it in your judges, your show catalogs or show codes or anything like this. Why? Because that research into the mutation has not yet been done properly and confirmed. And this is something we need to keep in mind as breeders, is that just because we produce something unique doesn't make it a new mutation. What makes it a new mutation is if you can reproduce that bird in its chicks, and those chicks, when they molt out in different environments, so different food, different sunshine quantities, all that kind of stuff, keeps the traits that you are looking for. And you then need to document how that gene is passed on. Is it recessive? Is it dominant? Is it codominant? Whatever the case might be. And only once you're able to prove that can you definitively claim to have something new in terms of mutations. Okay, so I hope that's made a lot of sense to you today. I hope it's sort of solved some of the mystery around your melanistic birds and what is true sort of melanism, if you like, or dark factor, versus the sort of genetic fault type version. And yeah, I mean, please, if you've got any sort of evidence of birds you've been breeding, I'd love to hear from you. Post it on the Facebook group. So if you're not part of our Facebook group, there is a House of Gouldians Facebook group. Or comment on the YouTube channel. It'll be great to sort of have that discussion online. Please, guys, stay tuned to the channel. There's some really exciting news coming. I don't want to go into details now because there's still sort of planning that needs to happen around it, but there's a lot of really some really exciting information coming. If you a club, please, I'm going to ask you to make contact with me. If you're a specialist Gouldian club anywhere in the world, please drop me an email. You can send it to Gouldian Finch Collective, which is the club that I'm part of, at gmail.com, and we will then pick that up. I'm wanting to build up a database of clubs. Perhaps there's some that we're unaware of, and then yeah, hopefully in the next couple of weeks I can share that news with you. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll catch you in 2 or 3 weeks time.